Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thought you could hear that bloody wood pigeon again. Anyway, I love all animals. Apologies if the pigeon is a little bit noisy though, because as many people comment on my other channel, I don't actually live in a forest, but there's quite a lot of trees, so we'll see. Today's topic of conversation, as you can see, I've got my coffee. It's going to be a little bit of a controversial one. As you can see, one of my children is having a little run around behind me. He's perfectly safe. Obviously, I am going to be keeping an eye on him, and if he goes to climb that bloody headboard as he normally does, then he shall be sat on my shoulder or have to go back in his tank for being naughty. Today's topic of conversation is actually going to be on whether you can or should house your bearded dragons together. To answer the first question, of course you can. To answer the second, should you? Probably not. I have very strong opinions on this, and a lot of people do, I've seen, keep their bearded dragons together, and so far, if they're, if they've been lived together happily, then you would assume that everything is fine and that it's worked out okay, it's perfectly fine, neither of them are bothered by each other, they're friends, they'd miss each other if they weren't together, all of these kinds of things. So I'm going to go through maybe some reasons you would want to, why it's not necessary, and why it can be really dangerous. So some of the reasons you might want to is if you are getting your first bearded dragon, you might just fancy getting two. The idea of buying two quite large tanks and sets of lighting and thing obviously is not only an extra cost, but it kind of looks cute to put two animals in the same tank and have them interact and have them be friends and stuff. If you want to, I would suggest that you buy two setups. These bearded dragons might be okay together when they are babies, as most bearded dragons are okay together when they are babies. As soon as you can separate them, I really would. We will get onto those reasons shortly. The second reason you may want to, as I've just suggested, is because you think your bearded dragon's going to be lonely. These creatures are dominant, territorial, and solitary animals, except for breeding. They do not kind of go around in pairs, they don't go around in groups, they don't miss each other, they're not particularly sociable with each other. And although you as a mammal may feel that kind of lust for social interaction and company, these guys don't have that same desire. They want to make sure they get the best of everything, the most food, the most light, etc, etc. And they are very kind of dominant over these things and very territorial, which can result in aggressive behaviour and injury to your dragon between their tank mates. Depending on the age of your dragon, these can be really severe. You can just have a little Google yourself. Babies often, especially in crowded tanks, you're looking at, ones in pet shops, maybe breeders, when they're really babies do kind of nip at tails and things, which can cause kind of like little marks, little cuts and things, damaged toes, things like that. When you're getting into big dragon sharing tanks, you're talking like a couple of dragons in one tank, you can get some really nasty, serious injuries that do a lot of damage, cause a lot of bleeding, and need some kind of serious veterinary surgery or correction afterwards. It can be really, really dangerous, especially when they're getting closer to adulthood. Your next reason for keeping them together may just be that you saw an ad, you want to kind of adopt or rehome some, maybe like Craigslist or pre-loved if you're here, or you just know someone that's always kept them together, that have had a really kind of disruptive change in circumstance, and you're looking to adopt them and they've always been housed together. Just because they've always been housed together and there hasn't been any problems so far doesn't mean that there might not be problems in the future. I would really think twice about adopting bearded dragons and continuing to keep them in the same tank. Obviously it's going to cost you to separate the two. This will obviously come at a financial cost to you. However, I personally feel like it is much better to cost you financially in the sense of buying a new tank than it is to have to give that money to a vet because your dragon is injured. If you go and have a little Google yourself, then you will find lots of pictures or instances on forums and things where dragons had been fine their whole lives and then suddenly got into a fight and one ended up hurt and needed veterinary treatment. Even though dragons can be fine and tolerate each other over a period of years and not really get into much of a scuffle, it really is still a big risk for you to be taking. And I personally feel like to a degree it is quite irresponsible to be putting two solitary animals that are very territorial, even if they appear to be fine with each other, in the same space. Of course, you may argue that obviously breeders have to put bearded dragons together. The purpose of breeding, the whole kind of scenario of breeding, is a totally different situation, and if you are doing that because you want to breed baby dragons or have a clutch of your own, then that is totally different, and I expect you to be supervising your dragons appropriately and doing this only in breeding season. I really hope that if any of you are considering doing this, or you have two bearded dragons at home that you think are just fine, that you really do consider separating them. These guys are really gorgeous animals and they deserve to be kept safe. I know that most people, if they have kind of bought them in a pair from a breeder, or they have, you know, as I said, adopted as a pair that were kept together, may just not know that maybe this isn't the best thing for you to do, and it can just be simply a lack of education. Some people, of course, are going to disagree with me because they've kept dragons for years and they've always paired them up and haven't had a problem. I would suggest that you are very lucky. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule, but on the majority, dragons don't like being housed together and they kind of just tolerate each other. That really cute kind of behaviour of like stacking that you see, that's not like them hugging or hanging out. Thank you, buddy. That is one kind of taking all of the heat and UVB source from the other one. That can cause stunted growth, they can have fights over food and stuff, and you often will see one dragon bigger than the other, not just because of a difference in sex, when they are cohabiting. I really hope that you kind of take this as what it's meant to be, and that if you guys are keeping your bearded dragons together and that you've had no problems, that you seriously reconsider. If you choose not to and you think I'm completely crazy and that everything is fine and it's not a risk to your dragon, that's on you. But just like keeping many animals together where there is a risk of them getting territorial or aggressive with each other, I do think you have to be really, really vigilant with this stuff, and frankly I just wouldn't do it in the first place. I know that it can feel really personal when someone disagrees with what you're doing or what you think is best for your animal, but I just personally feel that if you can have a little Google, and it's a very common thing that bearded dragons injure each other when they're cohabiting, that kind of tells you that this is not just like a one-off or a very small risk. It tells you that they don't really belong together. At the end of the day, you are responsible for your pet's well-being and you have to do what you think is best. However, as I've said, I personally don't think they need a tank mate, and I think it can be potentially dangerous. If you are considering getting a bearded dragon as a brand new bearded dragon owner, I certainly wouldn't be considering getting two in one go to start with anyway, and I certainly wouldn't be putting those two in a tank together, especially if you are not an experienced keeper. As you can probably tell from this video, I do have very strong opinions on this matter. I do think that anything that potentially endangers your animal's health is not a good idea. Another reason why I also will never use sand with Gary. Another very heavily debated topic in the bearded dragon community. I'm sure we will be having a discussion about that at some stage. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and it's given you a little bit of insight into some of the reasons why I don't think it's a good idea and some of the things that can happen with your bearded dragon. Also a little bit about their kind of natural nature and why it's kind of not important for them to be housed together. As I said, they're not like us, they're reptiles, they're not mammals, they're not going to get lonely, they don't need a friend. Their kind of survival instinct is all about getting the best light, the best food, the most light, the most food, and they will not see each other as friends, they will see each other as competition. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you don't take it too personally. As I said, if you are keeping them together, you have to do what you think is best for your dragons at the end of the day. I hope that if you do have a difference of opinion to me, you can maybe put it respectfully in the comments. Always happy to discuss these things and learn from each other. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you have. Hit that subscribe button if you're not part of our little family, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye!